You've seen it on television. A steel boat the size of a small apartment building getting buried under waves 3 stories tall. The deck is a solid sheet of ice. The men working on it haven't slept in over a day. And somewhere below their feet, in a room the size of a walk-in closet, one of them is about to do something that sounds completely impossible. He's going to fall asleep. Not because he's safe, not because the storm has passed. The boat is still rolling 30 degrees from side to side. The water on the other side of that steel hull is around 34 degrees Fahrenheit, barely above freezing. Cold enough to incapacitate a grown man in minutes and kill him not long after. And this guy is going to climb into a bunk, close his eyes, and sleep better than you did last night. Here's the thing almost nobody understands about crab fishing in the Bering Sea. The danger everyone talks about, the waves, the ice, the 700-pound pot swinging across the deck, that's only half the job. The other half is a problem no camera ever really captures because it happens below deck in the dark. It's the problem of sleep. And how these men solve it is stranger than almost anything you've seen on screen. There are 3 layers to this story. The first explains why sleeping out here is nearly impossible. The second reveals how the boat itself is built to fix that. And the third is something almost nobody expects. By the end of this video, you'll never look at that footage the same way again. So let us start with the obvious question. Why is sleep such a problem in the first place? You work, you get tired, you go to bed. That is how it works everywhere else on Earth. But out here, it does not work like that, not even close. And to understand why, you have to understand what the clock actually means on a crab boat. The Bering Sea crab season is one of the most compressed, most punishing work schedules anywhere on the planet. For decades, it ran as what fishermen called a derby. A flat-out race where the season could be over in a matter of days, and the boat that hauled the most crab in that tiny window made the most money. The rules have changed since then. The seasons are longer and a little safer now, but the mindset never left. The window is short. The weather is worse, and every single hour the gear is sitting in the water is money on the table. So when the crab are running and the weather holds, the boat does not stop. The pots come up, get emptied, get rebaited, and go straight back down around the clock, hour after hour after hour. A single string of pots can be dozens of them spread across miles of ocean, and running the whole string can eat up the better part of a day. And the moment you finish, you start again. There is no natural stopping point built into the work. The crab do not care that it is 3 in the morning. The captain does not care that you are tired. The only thing that matters is the gear in the water and the clock that never stops running. Which means the crew, usually just 4 to 6 men, works in a state most people will never come close to experiencing. 20 hours awake, 30 hours, sometimes more, on a deck that is moving the entire time in the cold hauling gear that can weigh as much as a small car. And it's not dry work. The spray, the rain, the crab tanks, everything is wet. And out here, wet means cold that gets into your bones and stays there. Out on that deck, sleep isn't a part of the schedule. There is no schedule. Sleep is something you steal in 2 or 3 hour pieces whenever the captain finally calls a break. And that kind of sleep debt does something to a person. Push a human being past a full day with no rest and the body starts to rebel in dangerous ways. Reaction time falls apart. Judgment gets foggy. Men describe microsleeps. Your eyes are open, your hands are still moving, but your brain blinks out for a second or two without you even knowing it happened. On a factory floor, that's a scary thought. On a pitching deck, surrounded by swinging steel pots and open water, a 2-second blackout is how people die. Some of the old hands will tell you about hallucinations on the long hauls, seeing things in the rigging, hearing voices in the engine noise. That's the body screaming for the one thing it can't have. So here's the first problem nobody thinks about. Even when a deckhand finally gets to lie down, almost everything is working against him. Because a loaded crab boat does not sit still for a single second. In a calm sea, it's rolling gently. In a working sea, it's pitching and rolling 20-30 degrees over and over all night long. Your inner ear never stops firing. Your body never fully relaxes. Even while you're asleep, some part of you is bracing, gripping the edge of the mattress so you don't get thrown out. And in heavy weather, men have been thrown out straight onto the steel floor in the middle of the night. Add the noise, the slam of the bow burying into a wave, the groan of the hull, the rattle of gear on deck, and the cold, and the smell of diesel and bait and wet wool. And you have an environment that seems almost designed to make sleep impossible. So how does anyone sleep through all of that? The answer isn't willpower and it isn't toughness. The answer is in how the boat itself is built. Because the place these men sleep is engineered for exactly this. Most of the bunks sit low in the boat near the bow in a section called the forecastle forecastle if you ask anyone who's worked there. They're stacked 2 and 3 high and they're narrow on purpose. Crews sometimes call them coffin bunks and the cramped fit is the entire point. A wide comfortable bed would throw you around all night like cargo. A tight one wedges you in place so the rolling cannot sling you out. The boat is trying to move you and the bunk is built to refuse. Then there is a simple piece of canvas called a lee cloth. It is a flap of heavy fabric that pulls up along the open side of the bunk and ties off, turning your bed into a kind of soft-walled box. When the boat heels hard over, the lee cloth is the only thing standing between you and the floor. It costs almost nothing. It is also the difference between sleep and a broken arm. Some men rig padding along the rails, wedge themselves against the hull, and do whatever it takes to turn a moving platform into something their body will accept as a bed. And here's a detail that surprises almost everyone. The best bunks on the whole boat are usually the ones closest to the engine room. Most people would guess that's the worst spot. The heat, the noise, the vibration. It's the opposite. The engine throws off steady, reliable warmth in a place where everything else is freezing. And the constant low drone of the diesel becomes a wall of white noise that swallows the chaos, the same way some people fall asleep to a fan. Men who fish out here say that sound stops being noise and becomes something almost comforting. They sleep to it for weeks. The day that hum stops or changes its pitch is the day every man on the boat sits straight up in the dark because that sound stopping means something has gone wrong. Sleeping itself has to be organized too because the boat can never be left to run itself. While part of the crew rests, someone is always awake on what is called the wheel watch, up in the wheelhouse, watching the radar, reading the weather, and keeping an eye on the autopilot the old hands nicknamed the Iron Mike. The watches rotate a few hours on, a few hours off, so the boat always has eyes open even when half the crew is unconscious below. On smaller boats with fewer bunks than men, crews will even hot bunk. One guy rolls out still warm, and the next guy rolls straight in. The mattress never getting cold. The bunk in use 24 hours a day. And the captain, more often than not, he sleeps the least of anyone on board. He will go far longer than his crew on coffee and pure instinct, catnapping in the wheelhouse chair with one eye on the instruments because the entire boat, every life aboard it, rides on his judgment. There are captains who will tell you they barely slept at all during the worst stretches of a season, running for days on fragments of rest, because the responsibility never lets them fully let go. But all of this raises a darker question, one that every man on that boat thinks about, and almost none of them say out loud. What happens if something goes wrong while you are asleep below deck? Picture this. It's 3 in the morning. You finally got into your bunk an hour ago after 28 hours on your feet. You're several levels down inside the hull, in a room with no windows, behind a heavy door, unconscious in the deepest sleep of your life. and the boat takes a wave the wrong way. This is the scenario that quietly haunts this entire line of work. Down in the forecastle, you are the farthest from the deck and the slowest to get out. If the boat is going over, the men below have the least time and the longest path to open air. The water waiting on the other side of that steel is near freezing, and at that temperature, a person does not have minutes to spare. They have seconds before the cold steals their breath, then their grip, then their ability to think clearly enough to save themselves. That's why every crew carries immersion suits, the bulky neoprene survival gear that fishermen call Gumby suits, stored where a man can reach them fast. That's why good captains drill their crews on finding the exits in total darkness, half asleep, feel alone. Commercial fishing has long ranked among the deadliest jobs in America, and Bering Sea crab boats have historically sat right at the very top of that list. Every man asleep down there knows the math. And somehow, knowing all of it, they close their eyes and sleep anyway. Which brings us to the third layer, the part nobody expects. Ask a man who has spent a full season out there whether the hardest part of the job is the sleep he loses on the boat. A lot of them will tell you no. The strange part, they'll say, isn't sleeping at sea. The strange part is sleeping once they get home, because something happens to the body out there. After enough days of constant motion, your brain stops fighting the rocking and starts depending on it. The roll of the boat that should keep you awake becomes the exact thing that knocks you out cold the second your head hits the bunk. The exhaustion is so complete and the rhythm so total and so steady that men describe it as the deepest, heaviest sleep they have ever had in their lives, a kind of blackout rest that no quiet bedroom on land has ever given them. And then the season ends. The boat ties up at the dock, the engine finally goes silent, and these men go home to a bed that doesn't move. And they lie there in the dark on solid, motionless ground, and they cannot sleep at all. The stillness feels wrong. The silence feels wrong. Their body keeps waiting for a roll that never comes, bracing for a wave that isn't there. There is even a name for that feeling of phantom motion that follows a person back onto dry land, that sense that the whole world is still gently swaying days after you've stepped off the boat. For some of them, it takes a week to shake. Some of them say a part of it never fully goes away. And then there's the thing nobody puts into words easily. Those 4 to 6 men packed into a space smaller than most living rooms, sleeping in shifts, sharing warm bunks, trusting each other with their lives in the dark. That does something to people. The closeness of it, the total dependence on the men a few feet away, becomes its own kind of pull. Plenty of them complain about the season the entire time they're out there. And then, a few weeks on land, in a quiet, still, comfortable bed, they start counting the days until they can go back. So the next time you see that footage, those men climbing down into a dark, freezing, pitching steel box to sleep in the middle of the deadliest water on Earth, understand what you're really looking at. They are not suffering down there. They're warm, they're wedged in tight, the diesel is humming them under, and a lot of them are sleeping better than you ever have in your life. Now I want to hear from you. What are the worst conditions you have ever managed to fall asleep in? A plane, a car, a job site? Drop it in the comments. And if you learned something today, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.